He dismissed her on a Friday at 4:47 in the afternoon, didn't look up, didn't say her name. Just slid a white envelope across his mahogany desk with 2 fingers and told her to clear her workstation by end of business. Faye Morrow picked up the envelope. She did not open it. She said, "Understood, Mr. Carver," and walked out. 3 days later, Ronan Carver sat in a windowless security room beneath the Meridian Tower, watching recovered dock surveillance footage on a flickering monitor, and he forgot, for several long seconds, how to inhale. The Gulf of Mexico is not romantic, not from where Ronan sat. From the 44th floor of the Meridian Tower in downtown Houston, the ship channel looked like a conveyor belt, endless tonnage moving in and out of port, oil, liquefied gas, steel coils, auto parts, and underneath all of it the other cargo, the kind that didn't appear on manifests. Ronan controlled the port. He controlled the logistics brokers who processed the paperwork. He controlled 3 city council seats and 2 county judges, and he had a standing dinner reservation at Brennan's that had never once been refused. He was 46 years old, and he had built everything from a used truck company his father left him, and a single phone number his father made him memorize before he died. He did not think of himself as a criminal. He thought of himself as infrastructure. The only person in his organization who matched his level of operational precision was a 29-year-old logistics coordinator named Faye Morrow, who wore the same rotation of gray slacks and pale blue button-downs and kept her dark hair in a bun so tight it looked architectural. She sat outside his office, 12 feet from his door, and she never knocked unless she had already solved the problem she was about to mention. He could not have told you the color of her eyes. He had never tried. She was part of the furniture, efficient furniture, the kind that made the whole room function, the kind you only noticed when it was gone. He would notice. The meeting with Edgar Pruitt happened on a Thursday. Edgar Pruitt ran chemicals through South Texas, legitimate on paper, less legitimate below the surface. And he had been pushing north into Ronan's distribution channels for the better part of a year. Ronan had summoned him to the Meridian Tower, not for negotiation but for demonstration. Coming to Ronan's building meant acknowledging whose city this was. Pruitt arrived with 3 men who stood like they were paid to stand. Ronan sat at the head of the conference table with Marcus Doyle flanking the door. Head of security, former Army Ranger, twice broken nose, the temperament of a man who had stopped finding things surprising. The conversation went fine until it didn't. "Faye," Ronan said, hitting the intercom, "bring up the tonnage records from Q3, the Pruitt account specifically, 3 copies." Silence. He hit the button again. "Faye." The intercom hissed. Pruitt smiled. It was the kind of smile you put on when someone else's problem becomes your opportunity. "Having trouble with the staff, Ronan." Ronan did not answer. He looked at Doyle. Doyle looked back with an expression that said he had no explanation either. Faye Morrow was never away from her desk. She ate lunch at her workstation. She scheduled bathroom breaks around phone calls. She had once stayed until 11 p.m. on a Tuesday because a shipping manifest had a discrepancy of £1,400 and she would not leave until she found it. She was gone for 31 minutes. When she came back, she carried 3 folders, walked to the table with her usual unhurried pace, and distributed them without comment. Ronan looked at her. Her collar was slightly askew. There was a faint smell, industrial, metallic, something chemical, that cut through the recycled air of the conference room. She stood back, clasped her hands, and met his gaze with eyes that were a pale, clear gray. Flat, totally flat, no apology in them, no fear, just waiting. "Will there be anything else, Mr. Carver?" He told her no. He got through the rest of the meeting. Pruitt signed what Ronan needed him to sign and left with his 3 standing men, smirking on his way out. Ronan called Faye into his office at 4:47 p.m. He stood at the window. Behind him, the ship channel glittered with the last of the afternoon light. He said 31 minutes without turning around. She said she had been delayed. He said, in the flat voice he used for decisions that were already made, that the delay had cost him the upper hand in front of a man who was going to spend the next 6 months looking for a way to take what was his. She said, "I apologize, Mr. Carver." He slid the envelope across the desk. Cash. She picked it up. She looked at it for exactly 1 second. Then she said, "Understood," and she walked out. He expected her to hesitate at the door. She didn't. Out in the bullpen, Faye walked to her desk without looking at anyone. She opened the bottom drawer and took out a single manila folder she'd kept there since her first week. Nothing personal inside, just a spare copy of the building's emergency evacuation routes that she had updated herself, because the posted ones were 18 months out of date. She set it on the desk for whoever came next. She took her access badge, held it for a moment, her thumb against the edge. Then she placed it on her keyboard. Doyle walked by. He was a large, scarred man who moved like someone permanently braced for impact. He stopped when he saw the folder, saw the badge. "You cleaning out?" he said. "I am," Faye said. He looked toward Ronan's closed door. "He fired you. He terminated my employment." She picked up her coat. "Keep a closer eye on the building's HVAC access points, Doyle, especially the 43rd floor service corridor and the east parking structure. Camera 3 has been drifting in its mount. Someone could exploit the blind spot." Doyle stared at her. "How do you know about the mount?" Faye gave him a small, polite look that didn't reach her eyes. "I notice things." She walked to the elevator, pressed the button, and stepped inside when the doors opened. The last thing Doyle saw was her facing forward, coat folded over her arm, entirely still. The doors closed. The replacement HR sent up was named Brittany, and she was not Faye Morrow. Brittany used speakerphone in an open office. She forwarded calls from numbers she didn't recognize instead of screening them. She brought his coffee in a paper cup with a plastic lid, black, no oat milk, no temperature sleeve, and she had reorganized his filing system by color because it was, she explained, more intuitive. Now Ronan could not find the Pruitt account or anything else. But it wasn't the incompetence that bothered him most. It was the feeling that something had gone structurally wrong in the walls. The office felt porous, exposed, like a door had been left open in a room he hadn't known was pressurized. On Monday evening, after Brittany had packed up at exactly 5 o'clock, Ronan walked out to Faye's old workstation. He pulled open the drawers, empty, spotless. He pulled the bottom right drawer. It wouldn't move. Locked. He went back into his office, came back with a letter opener, and forced the mechanism until the wood splintered and the drawer slid free. Inside was a slim, dark green notebook. He opened it. The handwriting was small and controlled. Each letter formed without flourish, like someone who wrote for function rather than expression. March 4, black Dodge pickup, TX plates HZK8812, idling in the alley behind the east parking entrance for 2 AR 40 min. Driver made no calls, departed 1722. Cross-reference, same plate spotted outside Pruitt's Pasadena warehouse, Feb 28. He read the next entry, and the next. License plates. Shift patterns for a surveillance rotation that wasn't his team's. A note about a catering vendor change for a November board dinner. The new vendor had a registered owner with documented ties to a Sinaloa-linked distribution company. She had flagged it and, apparently, switched the vendor back to the original without telling anyone, noting only, resolved. Original vendor reinstated. New vendor contact forwarded it to Doyle's desk, anonymous source. Doyle had never mentioned it. Ronan closed the notebook. His hands were not entirely steady. He called Doyle. The security room under the Meridian Tower smelled like cold electronics and bad coffee. Doyle was already there when Ronan arrived, standing behind a technician who looked young enough to still be nervous about everything. "You need to see this," Doyle said. The texture in his voice was something Ronan rarely heard, something between reluctance and dread. The center monitor filled with a camera feed. The timestamp read Thursday, 13:49. The angle looked down a service corridor on the 43rd floor, the one that ran behind the conference center's HVAC access panels. Maintenance used it. Almost nobody else did. Faye walked into frame carrying the 3 folders. Her pace was exactly what it always was, unhurried, precise. She was heading toward the elevator that would take her up 1 floor. She stopped. A man stepped out of the shadow beside the access panel housing. He was wearing a gray maintenance uniform that was slightly too clean. In his hands was a pressurized canister connected to a hose junction, the kind used for HVAC additive systems, except it was not on any authorized maintenance schedule that Doyle's team had on record. The man saw Faye. He reached into his jacket. Ronan leaned forward. "Watch her hands," Doyle said quietly. Faye did not drop the folders. She did not step back. She stepped sideways, one fast movement that took her out of the direct line, and then she moved toward him instead of away. Her right hand came up in a controlled arc, and the hard spine of the folders connected with the man's forearm at the exact moment he was pulling something from his jacket. The object clattered to the floor. She caught his wrist with her left hand, pivoted, and used his own momentum to drive him face first into the HVAC housing. The sound of impact was visible in the way his knees buckled. He tried to come back up. She was faster. Her right knee went into the back of his, dropping him to the floor. She reached over him, efficiently, without drama, disconnected the canister from the junction, capped it with a valve fitting she produced from her cardigan pocket, and set it carefully against the wall. Then she pulled a zip tie from the same pocket, secured the man's wrists, and dragged him by the collar into the maintenance closet 7 feet away. She shut the door. She picked up her folders. She adjusted her collar, which had gone slightly crooked. Her chest rose, her chest fell. Then she continued toward the elevator. Timestamp, Thursday 14/2. 13 minutes. The other 18 were on a second feed the technician pulled without being asked. Ronan watched and did not speak. The second footage was from 4 months earlier, a parking structure 2 blocks from the building, 2 a.m. A figure in dark clothes was crouched beneath Ronan's parked SUV, working on the undercarriage. Ronan recognized the shape of what was happening before the camera angle confirmed it. Brake line, old reliable, nearly undetectable. From the left side of the frame, Faye walked in. She was wearing a long coat. She had a tote bag over one shoulder and should not have been anywhere near that parking structure at that hour. The figure under the car came out fast, blade in hand. Faye set the tote bag down carefully. That detail struck Ronan as the strangest thing, that she paused to lower the bag instead of dropping it. And then she was already moving, inside the blade's reach before the man could extend it, using the close distance as an advantage. A precise strike to the nerve cluster below his ear. His arm went briefly limp. She caught the blade before it fell, applied pressure to a point at his jaw that made him sink to his knees like something central had stopped working, and crouched in front of him. She said something into his face. Whatever it was, he nodded twice quickly. When she stood and pointed toward the exit, he walked away without looking back. Then she got to work on the brake line. She produced a small toolkit from the tote bag, worked for 11 minutes, sealed the cut with industrial tape, bled the valve with a small wrench, tested the pressure by hand, stood up, looked at her work, adjusted her coat, left. Ronan watched the empty parking structure for a moment after she disappeared from frame. "Who is she?" he said. Doyle put a single page on the desk beside the monitor. Faye Morrow doesn't exist. Social security number belongs to a woman who died in Baton Rouge in 2003. References are disconnected numbers. Degree is a quality forgery, he paused. She's a ghost, Ronan. A very well-made one. Ronan looked at his own reflection in the dark monitor. He had fired a woman who had intercepted a chemical attack on his conference room, foiled an assassination attempt on his vehicle, and documented more than a year of threat intelligence, all from a workstation 12 feet outside his door. He had fired her because she was 31 minutes late. "Find her," he said. His voice came out quieter than he intended. Doyle's team went to her apartment, stripped bare. The landlord had a cash payment for early termination that same morning. No forwarding address, no digital trail, no vehicle registered in her name, no social media, no loyalty cards, no gym membership. She had lived in Houston for 14 months and left no impression on the city whatsoever. Facial recognition at Hobby Airport, at Union Station at the Greyhound Terminal, nothing. Ronan spent 2 days with the green notebook. He found the answer on the last written page, filed between a note about a corrupted camera feed on Pier 7 and a vendor invoice that had been altered after submission. Cold Storage Unit 14C, Pier 19, Galveston. Installed personal, generator fuel 30-day supply. Egress, North Access Road, unmonitored after 21. She had planned for this. She had built a fallback. He should have sent a team. He went himself. Pier 19 at Galveston in January looked exactly like what it was. An industrial stretch of corrugated steel and salt air, and the kind of darkness that didn't get interrupted by much. Ronan drove with Doyle, no radio, headlights off for the last quarter mile. Cold fog sat low on the waterway. Cold Storage Unit 14C was at the end of a row tucked behind a stack of containers that smelled like rust and fish. The padlock on the door was new, heavy stainless, the kind you needed a grinder to open. But the door was slightly ajar. A low mechanical hum came from inside. Ronan reached for the door. The first shot came from the East Access Road. Not at him, at the ground in front of him, a warning or an overshot. Then the floodlights came on. 4 black SUVs had rolled into position across the only exit road while Ronan and Doyle had been looking at the storage unit. The beams trapped them against the container wall. Automatic weapons fire opened from 2 positions simultaneously. Controlled, disciplined, not panicked. These were not street men. Pruitt. Ronan moved left, putting the container between himself and the primary fire position. Doyle went right and returned fire with the methodical efficiency of someone who had trained for exactly this for 30 years. The noise was enormous in the fog-deadened air, metal on metal, the crack of outgoing rounds, the wet thud of incoming striking steel. "How many?" Ronan shouted. "Minimum 10. Probably more behind the vehicles." Doyle's voice was tight. "They'll advance in 90 seconds when they figure out we're not breaking position." Ronan was calculating angles. The water to the south, the locked gates to the north, 4 vehicles blocking the only road when the floodlight on the nearest SUV exploded. Not shot out, physically destroyed, like something heavy had struck it from directly above. The darkness rushed back in. Pruitt's men heard something they did not expect. In the world Ronan inhabited, hesitation was the thing that killed you. A figure dropped from the top of the container stack, dropped clean and fast, landed without a sound, and moved into the cluster of advancing men before any of them had fully processed that it had happened. The lead man went down in under 2 seconds, not shot, a strike to the throat, precise and final. His rifle hit the gravel, and the figure was already moving, redirecting the second man's weapon upward as it fired, using the noise and muzzle flash to mask a takedown that ended with the second man face down and motionless. One of Pruitt's men shouted. Another opened fire at shadows. The figure was no longer where they were shooting. It took less than 90 seconds. 5 men neutralized. The remaining team at the vehicles broke when a suppressed shot from somewhere in the dark took out the driver of the lead SUV, slumping him against the horn, which started a long, continuous wail that filled the entire pier. The last 2 vehicles reversed so fast that one left a side mirror on the access gate. The horn kept wailing. Faye Morrow walked out of the dark between 2 containers. She was wearing dark cargo pants and a black technical jacket, her hair pulled back, a streak of grease across one cheekbone. She held a suppressed pistol at her side, finger off the trigger, pointed at the ground. She walked to the idling SUV, opened the driver's door, moved the dead man's foot from the pedal, and reached under the dash. The horn stopped. The silence that came after was very large. She turned to face Ronan. "You're loud, Mr. Carver," she said. Her voice was exactly what it had always been, measured, unhurried, faintly dry. "You also arrived 40 minutes ahead of when I estimated you would." Ronan looked at her. He holstered his gun. "Doyle's hit," he said. She crossed to Doyle without being asked. Doyle, who took orders from exactly one person on Earth, held perfectly still while she examined the entry and exit points of the wound in his left side, applied direct pressure with folded material from her jacket pocket, and told him in a flat clinical voice that it had missed the organs, and that he was going to need a private surgeon and antibiotics for the next 10 days. "You'll be fine," she said. "Don't sit up fast." "Yes, ma'am," Doyle said. It was something Ronan had never heard him say to anyone. Faye stood. She looked at Ronan, 3 feet of cold salt air between them. "How did you find the unit?" she asked. "The notebook," he said. "Last page." Something moved through her expression. Not quite self-recrimination, not quite surprise. A lapse. "I assumed you'd be too angry to read it carefully." "You assumed wrong." "I did." A beat of silence. "Who are you?" he said. Not loud, not aggressive. Just the question he'd been carrying for 3 days. "Doyle pulled your file. The real one doesn't exist, so I'm asking you directly." Faye looked at him for long enough that he thought she might not answer. The fog shifted around them. Somewhere on the water a vessel sounded its horn. "My name is Faye Morrow," she said. "That part is real." "The rest of it?" "The rest of it is a construction." She paused. "I was with a private intelligence firm for 6 years. Asset protection, threat mitigation, high-risk extraction. I left 4 years ago." "Why were you in my building?" She looked at the water, the way people do when they're about to say something they've been holding for a long time. "Because of your father," she said. Ronan went very still. "Robert Carver was not an easy man," Faye said. "I don't think you did disagree." She looked back at him. 5 years ago, I was running an operation in Monterey that went wrong in every direction. I was burned by my own firm, wounded and out of options. One of your father's men found me in a parking structure at 2 a.m. with a gunshot in my shoulder." She paused. "Your father was there finalizing an import arrangement. He didn't know who I was. He saw someone trained and injured and cornered, and he made a decision. He helped you. He put me in a cargo truck and got me to a private doctor in San Antonio. He gave me a new identity and told me to disappear." She looked down at her hands. The knuckles were split in 2 places. "He asked for nothing, didn't want my name, didn't want information. He said, 'Go live a quiet life,' and walked back to his business." Ronan thought about his father, the man who had handed him a phone number and a used truck company, and said, "The rest is up to you." "There's more," he said. "There is." She said it without hesitation. "My younger brother is 17. His name is Theo. Our father testified against a trafficking network operating out of Laredo when Theo was 12. They killed our father 6 weeks after the trial. Theo went into protective custody, but protective custody has limits. It works until someone with enough resources decides to look past it. She held his gaze. Your father knew about Theo. He moved him through a set of channels that don't touch any official record. Theo is safe because Robert Carver made him a ghost the same way he made me one. The fog moved, the water was very quiet. When your father died, Faye said, I read everything I could about what the transition would mean. I knew the Pruitt pressure would come. I knew you would be most vulnerable in the first 2 years. She met his eyes. You are intelligent, Mr. Carver, but you operate loudly. Fear is useful, but it draws the same attention it repels. I knew you needed a different kind of protection than the kind you were paying for. She paused. So I built a resume and applied for the position. You forged a degree and 3 references to get a job as my logistics coordinator. I forged a degree and 3 references to get the desk closest to your calendar, your access points, your visitor log, and your food supply. The ghost of something crossed her face. Not quite a smile, but close to the architecture of one. The logistics work was accurate. I am also genuinely fast at data entry. Ronan exhaled, not quite a laugh, not quite relief. The sound a man makes when the ground has shifted and he's deciding whether to fight it or move with it. 14 months, he said, how many times? The break line was the first. The conference room was the 7th. She did not look away. Pruitt has been probing your vulnerability since April. And tonight he's short a kill squad, and whatever confidence he had walking into this. Ronan looked at the unconscious men on the gravel, arranged with the detached efficiency of someone cataloging inventory. Well, after the first time, I would have paid whatever you asked. I would have put you in charge of everything. I know, she said. That's exactly why I didn't. He looked at her. In your world, Faye said quietly, loyalty is a transaction. If you had known what I was capable of, you would have reoriented around it. You would have given me a title and a budget and spent every night wondering when I'd calculate that betraying you was worth more than protecting you. She held his gaze. By being invisible, I remained effective. You didn't have to trust me. You didn't even have to see me, which meant I could work without the weight of your suspicion. The truth of it settled into Ronan's chest, with the particular heaviness of things that are both obvious and impossible to have seen coming. And then I fired you, he said. You terminated my employment, she said, which discharged my obligation. The debt was paid. I was leaving tonight. A slight pause, before Pruitt complicated the schedule. Ronan looked at her for a long moment. The cold air was clean. Above the fog, a few stars had come through. He had built his empire on the belief that he controlled the variables. For 14 months, the most consequential variable in his world had been sitting 12 feet from his door, eating a packed lunch and tracking threats he never knew existed. He reached into his jacket. His hand found the white envelope, the severance damp from the fog. He held it out. Faye looked at it. She didn't move. I don't want money, Mr. Carver. It's not money, he said. She took the envelope, opened it. Inside was the green notebook. Pruitt is wounded, not finished, Ronan said. He'll call in every marker he has by morning. I have men who can hold a perimeter, but holding perimeters was never the problem. He took one step toward her, not closing the distance, just acknowledging it. I need someone who sees the things that don't announce themselves, who works where the light doesn't reach. He held her gaze. I need the ghost, but not behind a desk. Beside me. Faye looked at the notebook in her hands. She turned it once, slowly, in her fingers. Then she looked up. For the first time in 14 months, she smiled. It was a small thing. One corner of her mouth, a fraction of a degree, but it changed the entire geometry of her face. Made her look, briefly, like someone who had not spent 4 years being invisible by necessity. My rate, she said, has gone up significantly since the parking structure. Name it, Ronan said. And I don't handle the mail. He almost smiled back. Done. She tucked the notebook into her jacket pocket, turned, and began moving toward the SUV with the quiet, deliberate efficiency he now understood was not passivity. It had never been passivity. It was the stillness of someone who is absolutely certain of what they are capable of, who has nothing left to prove, and everything to protect. Ronan Carver had built an empire on the assumption that the loudest force in the room was the strongest one. Faye Morrow had spent 14 months proving him wrong from 12 feet away. He did not intend to waste the lesson.